This is absolutely work. I'm hitting record. Greetings from Somerville. Matt Ruby in the house here. And did I
Yes.
catch you in bed?
No, I mean, I am literally in a bed, but I have been up for a couple hours. But I'm just finding the room where it's happening. I'm finding the room where I can talk. Someone is on a work call in the other nicer room, which takes priority. So we're making it work. We're making it
That
work.
is that's I mean, we all know it well these days. That's why I am also in the bedroom. I had when I first started this, I live with my now fiance, and when we started, we always decided whoever had the most important work that day got the main room, and I have not been out of the bedroom yet. So
Yeah, it's like, you don't do anything important. What's the most important thing you do? You gotta
this
start
right.
like just I know this isn't important. You got to start like doing surgery on something. I don't know.
Well, it's important. I've been excited for days about this. This is important
Yeah.
to me. And you suggested 11 a.m. and I was like, oh, I guess we're not even comics anymore. I got to set an alarm for this thing.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like, I try to schedule all my stuff between like 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then the rest of the day, I just don't worry that I have something scheduled.
That's actually that's a good way to think of it. Yeah, because I'm always like scattered all over, and then the whole day I'm stressing about that 6 p.m. thing. And yeah, yeah.
I'm kind of bad at checking my calendar, and so sometimes I'll just like. Have you ever had like sometimes I'll have like some important like sort of call or something, and I'll be like, "Oh, damn, that's in 5 minutes. I got to get home," you know?
Well, I wasn't sure even but for this one, I was like, oh, do you send a reminder? Or do you just send the link like 20 minutes in advance? That's a sort of a subtle reminder.
I feel like for comedians, as much as we're delinquents in so many other areas of our lives, we get the concept of like a spot time.
That's true.
Like, and that if someone offers you something, you say yes, you write it down, and you know that you got to show up at that point or at that time. Otherwise, like I am not. I can't remember the last time I missed a spot. You know.
But yeah, but you've also already said that this was not that important. So I'm glad I.
Well, podcasts are a whole different realm. Podcasts are a whole like they're in like an audience waiting for us to show up and be in their face right now.
Well, that's for sure. Yes, this can happen anytime. And on that note, we are both. Tell us where you are actually physically in the world and who's home.
Yeah, right now I'm in Montauk, Long Island.
Oh,
Yeah, it's great. I'm with my girlfriend and staying at a friend's place. I live normally in Brooklyn, New York, in Fort Greene, but I've definitely been seeking a pathway out of the city as much as possible in like 90-degree heat. And when I don't know, it's depressing to talk about, but like COVID. First of all, COVID and stand-up comedy love the same things, which is a group of strangers gathered tightly together in a basement for 2 hours, laughing out loud. You know, like we occupy the exact same sweet spot. So unfortunately, like I don't see comedy coming back indoors anytime soon. There's like some outdoor shows, but even those seem like they're on the fence right now. And yeah, I just feel like being in the city, it's sort of like if you got no bars, you got no restaurants, you got no shows, you got no tourists, you got no offices, it's sort of like if you can get out of town, it feels like the thing to do, I guess is my philosophy around it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's absolutely nothing to do. I'm in the city. There's nothing to do here, and I have my diehard friends who are like, no, you stay. It's the city. You're married to the city, but of course they have nowhere to go. Like they don't have an option of getting that.
Yeah,
So,
everyone's ride or die when they ain't got any other car, right?
it's not like their second home is sitting there in the Hamptons and they're principled.
Yeah, totally. It's sort of and I love New York and I get it too, but I feel like this is not New York anymore. It's like saying you love your husband, but now he just started cheating on you. It's sort of like, well, this is not the guy that I
Yeah.
love.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly the way it
Which I guess
feels.
in that analogy, I feel like New York is cheating on me by being boring.
But yeah, they got stale.
It's
Let's say.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's also I think New York is all about getting out of your apartment. So
Yes.
the idea of being stuck in your apartment is like, like I just got a tiny place, and it's just sort of like, if I'm crammed in there all day, and I can go somewhere and have more space, and
Yes.
that's I'm gonna try to figure out a way to do that.
Well, exactly. And they say the city is your living room, and that's right now the living room's closed, and Yeah, there's nothing to do. So I like your style, which brings me to we were on a show the other night, and you had mentioned where you spent a little bit of time, and I found it just hysterical. I won't give away all the secrets, but you have been dating somebody since last fall, and tell
Right.
our listeners and viewers where this has ended up.
So basically, we've been dating since October, and when Corona hit in the city, I mean, at the very beginning, it was sort of like, what's going to happen? Is this like going to be like Hunger Games, like martial law, or like where are we going with all this? And her family lives in southern New Jersey, and basically like extended an invitation if we want to go down there and like just sort of ride it out, like let's see what happens kind of thing. And so yeah, I went and met her parents and slash moved in with them for 2 months. And it was her parents and my girlfriend and me and her little brother, and we're all just like kind of playing house for a couple months. And so it was definitely an interesting dynamic.
So
I
you've
tried
been
to like
I'm
go.
just kidding. You've been dating her. You've been dating her roughly 6 months leading up to this, right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
and
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 obviously
I,
got along.
I'm definitely thankful that we had that period too, because like I've known people who went on like 2 dates,
Yeah,
and then after Corona hit, like moved in together and stuff like that. So for me, it's like nice that we like everything was going well and we were into each other, and there was like a sort of like a foundation there, that it wasn't just some
right.
pandemic,
And how
rush
had you
job kind of
met her
thing.
parents at that point, though?
I had not though. No, um, it was, hey, I'll be upstairs. Let me know. Let me know if you need anything. And my big uh, way of attempting to ingratiate myself was like I like to cook, so I was just cooking a lot. So I'd make
Ah,
some like really nice dinners, and just sort of be feel like I was being of service in some way as opposed to just taking up space.
and that's a
Um,
huge thing, absolutely, especially when everyone's locked in. And that's a great entree. Tell me about the initial introduction, though, because I want to get to the cooking stuff too. You make fabulous stuff, as I've seen online. Um, that initial introduction of like meeting the parents? Did you know at that moment I'm here to move in, or was it like, hey, why don't you come for a week and just, or how did the actual I'm
yeah,
staying come up?
it was, the invitation was extended, and I was like a little bit anxious and nervous. It's sort of like pros and cons here
Right.
of like, do I want to endure like martial law and no access to food in a city gone mad during a pandemic, or do I want to like take a chance and meet this girl's parents and hope we can live out in the burbs for a while? Um, so, but yeah, it was. I think like we didn't have to fly anywhere or anything. It's not that far away, so there was always sort of like a get out of jail free card of like, what, if it's not working, I could come back to the city. My
Sure.
apartment was just sitting there. So, um, but yeah, and and also like out of the gate, they were like super nice and welcoming, and kind of like caught up. Everyone was like just sort of doing their own thing, caught up in their own stuff, and so
Right.
I feel like it was, it wasn't like some high pressure, like kind of like
Right.
meet the Fockers type situation of like yeah, and I was still I do like freelance writing stuff too, and so I was like working and like kind of doing stuff, so I just sort of like camp out in the bedroom during the day and just try to get stuff done, and like but it was definitely like weird. I mean, it's also, I don't know, in general, like this pandemic a little bit has just sort of shaken me out of my routine and whatever, like, normal mode of thinking around like relationships or meeting the parents or anything like that. And it's funny because I actually had a bit that I used to do long before any of this happened, which is like I'm just going to do a bit now, so forgive
I
me.
love it.
I always like to I always like to warn people when I'm like going into bit
Especially
mode.
another comic. Yeah.
Exactly, because we smell it. You ever be having a conversation with another comedian, be like, "Trying a bit on me right now?"
What do you
You
think he's
just
doing?
tell me you want to try a bit. You don't have to slip it in like, "Oh, it just came to you," you know. Um, which is always interesting to me on podcasts too, or like morning radio stuff, where it's
Ah.
like, like, you're trying to slide into bits, but like everyone knows what you're doing, But it's like, it's almost like that's the challenge of like how smoothly can you just slip it in there.
How
Um,
undetected.
yeah. Although that just sounded like Bill Cosby. But anyway, we got to move on. So okay, the bit that I was talking about was basically, and it's not that great a bit. I think it's why I stopped doing it. But it's basically like it used to be when I was younger, I wanted to wait as long as possible before meeting a girl's parents. Like maybe after like 2 years, I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll meet your parents. Now I'm like, bring them on the first date. I want to see how they mess you up as soon as possible. You know, like that should actually be like the new Tinder dating app where I could just swipe left and right on your parents. You know, and yeah, it's like, oh, she loves Barbara Streisand, but also takes a lot of pills. I'm gonna swipe left on that, you know.
It's
And
so
then actually,
true
I
though.
was like, actually, my parents should be the ones swiping and looking at her parents. So I guess really what I want to do is just bring back arranged marriages. That's really what I think the solution is here. Um, so that was the bit, which never took off because it's bizarrely complicated for like some like dating dating app joke. Also, I feel like all dating app jokes are a little bit tired at this point, unless you
Yeah,
got
but
some
that's kind
super
of
fresh
fresh.
take on it.
That's a fresh take on it,
Thanks.
definitely. And it's
Yeah,
great. It's true when it's where it all ends up. At the end of the day, let me see your mom. I want to see where this whole thing's going to end.
totally. And especially, it's sort of like if you're not sure where it's going or how you feel about someone, that's one thing. But if you're into them, it's sort of like, okay, yeah. And I'll also like I don't have much family left. I have like my sister and my nephew, but both my parents passed away, and I don't have any aunts or uncles or stuff. So when someone's like, come hang out with my family, I think I'm a little bit into it in a way that's sort of weird. I'm like, ooh, a family. This is exciting, you know? Like, are people going to be fighting? Oh, this is, like, like I think things that other people might recoil at or think is awkward. I'm like, oh wow, let's see what's going on with the siblings. All
This
right,
is
you know.
fun. Well, and as a comedian and a creative person yourself, a writer and all, do you find, I'd find that sometimes that stuff just excites me. Stuff that normally would panic maybe a regular person in life is like, oh, this is new. Let's go see how this works.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. That's part of what's cool about being a comedian, I think. And sort of is like, oh, this is, like I want to live a life that's interesting because then I'll have stuff to talk about, you know? It's sort of like
Exactly.
if all you do is like boring stuff and the same thing every day, like it's very likely your act or what you make is going to be boring. And
Nothing happening.
so yeah,
And
totally. And also it's like it's not just some random person's family. It's like this girl who I really like. So like I'll probably like her parents too, right? You know, it's just sort of a, you know, and it was pleasant, as opposed to like, and definitely I had all that said, I was like ready to bail out at any moment. Like I was like, after 3 days, if this is not feeling kosher, I'm gonna head back to the city, kind of thing,
and how about did you say there was a brother as well that she
Yeah,
had
yeah.
okay, how old was he roughly?
College age.
Oh, okay. So he's a dude. I mean, somebody you could talk to, wasn't like a kid. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. He would show me like cool movies. I'd be like, oh, this is what the kids are into now. All right. Like some weird animated film about wizards. Then I'm like, I bet in the dorms this is gets passed around kind of thing. I'm like,
This
all
is
right, now I feel cool. I definitely would not have watched this on my own kind of thing.
I have that. My fiance's niece and nephew are whatever, 12 and 10, whatever they are, and I just study them with their phones. And what are you app? What app are you on? And I think they think I'm the weirdest person, but I'm like doing research. They're like, what do I need to be on to reach this younger audience?
No, totally. Well, it's like I have a nephew who's 13. I'm fascinated. I like what he watches on YouTube. Is
Yeah.
like I'm at their house and there's like some conversation about squirrels and the bird feeder. And I'm like, yeah, how do the squirrels get to the bird feeder? And he's like, I got a video for you. And then he's like, no, I got a video about how squirrels get to bird feeders. I'm like, oh, this is going to be lame, but all right, show me.
Yeah.
It's this 25-minute video where this guy sets up like an obstacle course and then has a bunch of cameras and it's all slow motion about what squirrels can do to climb and jump. Most fascinating thing I've seen like in 6 months. I'm like, damn, I never would have guessed this existed. And he's just like, he's also really into domino toppling videos. So then he's showing me like some Japanese woman who's building up this elaborate domino setup in her basement. I'm like, I'm kind of on his side. I'm like, this YouTube is better than TV. I don't know why. Like, then when I watch cable, I'm like, oh, I gotta look at Anderson Cooper's face. Like, show me some dominoes.
Exactly. No, there's all that stuff, and there's no rules in terms of it has to be 22 minutes with commercials. It's like, oh, this is an awesome thing, and however long it takes to show it, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say he's also I'm not as into this. He's into like these like sort of stunt eating videos where they like throw a bunch of stuff in a blender that you should not be combining, and then some guy will it's sort of like Jackass but for food, I
Yeah.
guess. And I don't know. I'm just like, I prefer not to watch people eat disgusting things if I can help it.
Yeah. Well, something for everyone, like they say. On the note of food, I have you do some cooking, as you mentioned, and I've seen some of your stuff online. You do, as someone who's always dieting and always trying to, like, I'm starting programs and trying to do more vegetables and whatnot. Tell me a little more about your background. Were you just a natural chef? Did you grow up with it? And how do I get skinnier?
Sure. Well, I'm not a natural chef. I think it's like stand up. You just got to put in like reps and hours. I think there's a lot of, sort of analogies to be made between like stand up and how you take a dish, you make it one time, you tweak it, you're like, oh, and then, you start adding a
Ah,
little bit of this, and then like the more you start learning, then the more chances you can take. And like there's definitely like sort of like this innate knowledge that you get after just doing it, like, for
sure.
10,000 hours or whatever. So like I had a college roommate who was a good cook, and that was sort of like an eye-opening thing in a way that I probably, wouldn't have. And then I really like to eat, and I like there's a guy named Michael Pollan who wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma, which really sort of opened my eyes to food, and kind of like, sort of a lot of the poison that we're eating normally. And so I like that, to me, has made me like, I like to just know what I'm eating, and like to get stuff at a farmer's market, or like, real stuff, and make it. Also, to me, it's just, I like making stuff. I think for me it's sort of like some zen, like it's sort of like the most elemental version of creativity,
Sure.
or like, it's sort of like you have a bunch of random ingredients, and it's like a magic trick, and then you put them together, and then you've made something, and then also you get to give it to other people. Like when I'm cooking for myself, it's usually pretty simple, but when other people are around, for me, then there's more motivation to try to, like,
Yeah.
take more chances or try recipes.
Or having a place to
um
stay that night at your girlfriend's parents. You better make a good meal.
totally. Or like a real kitchen, like anytime I'm in like a real kitchen, I'm like, ooh, this is exciting.
How nice is
um
that after living in New York City too, getting out in the burbs with a real kitchen and counter space and
Totally. So I'm like,
yeah.
ooh, there's like an island. Wow, this is fancy. Good for you guys. Um, but and yeah, I mean, as far as like, I just losing weight, I think, I don't know. In general, like, I would like the Mediterranean diet, I guess is what they call it, but just like a lot of vegetables and fish, and like still can eat meat, but not that much. But like olive oil and lemon and fresh veggies, and you
Yep.
can make good stuff. And then just like, just not like fast food or fried foods, and just sort of like portion control. I think, a lot of Americans, which were just like trained, when you go to a restaurant, you're like, oh, this is a normal size serving. I should have 5 gallons of pasta every time I eat, and then you go, if you ever go to like Italy or something, you're like, oh, this is the amount of pasta that you guys eat.
This
You're like,
is the
this is why you eat, rich food, but are still all skinny.
you
It's
can
just sort of
also
like,
right.
we eat 3 times. It's like we take 3 times the recommended dosage.
Bigger and better, America. Here we go.
Yeah.
What is your? Do
But
you
are you?
have a? Go ahead.
I just wonder, are you really like trying diet, or have an approach, or like what's your like
Yeah.
sort of status with stuff?
Well, it's funny, and I will come right back at you with a bit. I used to do one of my favorite jokes is
Please.
like, it's not that hard losing weight. Ask any doctor, how do I lose weight? Eat right and exercise, and we're all like, what else you got? It's just,
Yeah.
but it's so true. Like we all kind of know there's book after book being written, and you're like, no, I think the information's pretty, straightforward. I'm with you. I was encouraged to start, the amounts, the portion control. I downloaded an app after years of resisting, of writing down what I ate, how much I ate that day. Like, I know what I'm
Hmm.
eating, I'm fine. When you start writing it down, it's stunning. Like, literally the amounts you
Yeah.
ate that day, and you look at the end of the. So I got an app, and I've been doing that, which has been real helpful. Like, oh gosh, like you have X amount of calories, and that you can have something that you enjoy, but you write it down and make sure you're not blowing through your
Yeah.
calories. But I do. I'm like you. I'm not a good cook, but I like cooking. I like messing around in the kitchen. I like watching your videos. We got the cast iron skillet, the whole thing. I mean, I'm like, yeah, I like that stuff. And I've been doing salmon and vegetables, and just trying to like you said, play around. Like, well, I don't like that. I do like that. So I have no idea if I have any. I just keep going until it tastes half decent. Which usually
Yeah.
involves salt and
I mean,
hopefully not. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like I mean, I do like trying recipes. I use like the New York Times as a cooking app that like I use a lot. That's actually like pretty good. And for like a lot of times, that's how I'm learning is just like trying a recipe out, and then I'll be like,
Okay.
oh, this is yeah. So that helps a lot. And then yeah, to me sometimes it's just interesting. Like growing up, like everyone hated Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
Like Brussels sprouts were gross and disgusting. And then like 15 years ago, like we all realized like we were just making them wrong. Like, why do we keep steaming these things so they're wet and soggy? Why don't we put
Soggy and
them
steam.
in the oven and they'll be like crispy and like caramelized and taste amazing?
Yeah.
And then it's like, to me, it's like kind of amazing that there's like fashion in food. You know, like I have a bit about kale, about like kale had the best decade of anyone in the past 10 years. Like if you had told kale 10 years ago where it would be today, kale wouldn't have believed you, you know, and it
Wouldn't
goes on from
have.
there. You know, and same with like pink Himalayan sea salt. Like, man, these people in the Himalayas are like, finally, we got a hit. We did it. You know, it's like no one knew about that shit 5 years ago. Now it's like everywhere. Like so it's just so there is yeah, there's a lot of like fashion, and this is like again, this Michael Pollan guy talks about like just don't eat any food that your grandma wouldn't recognize as food.
But
Like
yeah,
that's like the most important thing. If it's something that you showed your grandma or your great grandmother, she'd be like, I don't know what that is, then don't eat it. You
that's
know.
that's a great.
And he
What a
also
great rule. Yeah.
yeah, and then he also talks about how anything that says it's healthy on the packaging isn't healthy. Like anything that says diet or low fat or something like that is like, you know what doesn't say that? Like carrots
Yeah.
or potatoes or
That's.
lemons. There's never like, oh, these are the low fat lemons. Like things that are actually healthy don't have to like keep telling. I always think of it as, it's like when someone insists they're your friend.
Right.
Like, oh
Right.
no, but you and me, we're good
We're
friends. So you don't
friends.
have to worry
Yes.
about it. The more someone has to tell you that you're friends, the more wary you should be of whatever they're selling you because it's something, you know?
It's exactly. Or someone tells you you can trust me. You're like, yep. And no, it makes sense. It does. And that's it. If it wasn't here on Earth and wasn't put here by whatever, then probably shouldn't be eating it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that makes sense. Well, what did you make for your girlfriend's parents? Did they have a special thing that they loved? What was your first meal? Did they have requests?
Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a couple that they requested I make again, and that's always the good sign as a cook. You're like, yeah, you want that again? All right.
Let's
It's
go.
like it's like what that's a bit that's working. You know, you're like, all right,
Yeah.
I'll try that one again. I'll add a couple tags. We'll see how it goes. Let, let let's see if I can turn this appetizer into an entree. You know. um, but yeah, I don't
Got
know. I made like
rebooked.
this yeah, this vinegar chicken dish that went well. I make like a lot of pastas, so there's like
Okay.
uh, and then I did like normally I'm not a fancy salad guy, but I would take more chances on salads. There was like some sort of like what was it, the pear and gorgonzola and you know greens and stuff that I wouldn't normally do. I definitely
Yeah.
would not do if I was like home alone, just like making something for myself. But it's like, oh, let's try to be a little more fanciful or something here.
Sure. Show a little flair
Trying to
here.
think what else. Yeah, I made like a
Okay.
beef stew. But that was a whole. Sometimes that you make something and you're like, okay, I'm not ever doing that again. That was way too much effort for it was
Well,
all
that
right, but
that's what I find with the effort is like how long is this recipe? How many things? They call it easy, moderate, hard, and I'm sticking to easy for now. Like I don't want to be
yeah.
there for because whatever says 20 minutes takes me an hour and a half anyway. So
I look at the ingredient list, and if it's more than like 8 ingredients, I'm like, nah. That it's like it's sort of like a framework for me because especially with like cookbooks, there's a lot of cookbooks that they're like fancy photos and like they got some cuisine they're trying to put over on you, and it's like great. I'm sure I would like to eat that, but I'm not going to go to whatever store you want me to go to and find these 20 ingredients that I've never even heard of. I'm just like this isn't happening.
right.
So like
I like that rule.
uh,
I'm going to adopt it. Eight or less. That's
yeah,
good.
totally. And also like you can make a lot of like great stuff that's really good. I'm going to send you a bean dish. That's something I've gotten into during pandemic and like with
Please.
her family and stuff. Like a lot of like chickpeas and like kind of that you can do interesting stuff, and it's kind of like hearty but without it being like a meat dish because I like
Please
meat a lot
do.
but I just don't like eating it all the time. And so you can do stuff with beans that's sort of like, oh, this is kind of like a real meal. It tastes good, but it's not that hard. If you use the canned ones, you kind of just throw it in there, and it's like
I
you can make something sing in a pretty quick time frame.
I count me
I'll
in.
hook you up. I'll hook
I
you up
please.
with a
I gotta.
cheesy. a cheesy bean bake. Gonna
I think you had
change your
that
life.
on your. I think you had it right in your Instagram.
Probably,
I
yeah.
just because it looked and sounded good, and I'm right with you. I mean, like I eating too much meat. I should try to transition a little more beans, maybe every other, try every other meal because every day it's either chicken or fish. I'm like, it's probably a lot. So bean me
Yeah,
up.
and that it's the sort of thing too, where it's like I need a recipe because if someone gives me a can of beans, I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? And I'm like, oh, tomato paste and garlic, and then I add water,
Yeah,
and then it's a whole thing. I'm like, and then it's like, and it's only like 20 minutes, and it tastes great. Like,
I
all
love
right,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
no,
then
can of beans
it's
is a
definitely like
paperweight.
bits. A lot of it you wind up throwing out, but every once in a while you're like, oh, there's something. This was easy to make and it's good. All right, I'm putting this in the rotation. This goes in the set. You know,
That's gonna be my closer. Now
totally, totally.
I won't keep you forever, but we have two questions that we want to know here. When you were at the girlfriend's place,
Yeah.
what were the sleeping arrangements? And then the last question will be how did it all end? After 2 months, you moved out. Why? And how is the relationship now?
Sure, sure. So we were sleeping in her bedroom together. It wasn't like her childhood bedroom because they had moved to a new house. So I'm
Okay.
glad about that because I think that's a little bit weird. Like if there's
Yeah,
still,
you're in the twin
you know,
bed.
if yeah, if there's like dolls and like the NSYNC poster and stuff, it's like that seems like it would be a little uncomfortable. Um, it was like a small bed though, so that was we overcame that obstacle somehow. Um, and it was great. I mean, we like I've seen them again since. I mean, like sometimes, what I will say is like when it's someone else's family, sometimes that's the easy job. Like it's more like sometimes I think it's more challenging in some ways for her. When we're hanging out with her parents, because everyone's got issues with their parents that is like have been built up over a lifetime, and I'm just like, nah, they seem cool. I like them. What's
Right,
the
right, yeah, yeah,
problem?
like, yeah.
It's just like you don't know what they're like. I'm like, all right, I
they
guess.
they liked my
Um,
cooking, and we're all good. Yeah, they laughed at
yeah,
my jokes.
yeah, totally. So I mean, we've hung out again since, and I'm a fan of theirs, and it's
Okay,
been fun,
but what
and
ended it?
yeah, and
What was there a point where you're like, all right, see ya. Why'd you leave?
New York City wasn't spiking anymore, and it seemed like
Okay,
everything was like a little more reasonable. Also, just wanting to get back home and be in my own space and
yeah,
apartment and be back in New York and see what it's like, and kind of just can't can't live with the parents forever, Michael. Some point you gotta leave the nest and
bust out.
get on with your life. Um, but yeah, overall for me it was like a positive experience, and it's like the pandemic was rough, like psychologically, I think in a lot of ways. So it was nice to like have people to go through it with, and it's sort of like like because the other I've spent much of my life being single or alone, and so like that's something I've like wondered in my head, like, wow, what would it have been like to go through all of this like alone in my apartment, sort of thing, and like that I think would have presented some challenges, and so it would have been
Absolutely.
nice probably in some ways to just, but also I could just see myself in like a pile of Cheetos and a blanket, just like, the blinds are pulled and I'm just like, hey, it's a pandemic. What are you going to do?
I always said like if I was living alone, I would have had child services come get me because it wouldn't have been just I agree with you, man.
Can you call child services on yourself?
Yeah.
Be like, child services, you really need to come check on this guy. I don't know how I'm doing.
You should
Can you
not feel.
can you send some parents for me?
Well, it's awesome. I appreciate you taking the time. It's one of the more unique stories I've heard about isolation or quarantine, and I'm glad it worked out for you. And I'm glad I'm getting a bean dish out of it. This is awesome.
Totally. Yeah, I can't wait to send it to you.
Yeah, cool, man. Well,
You
you
got
look great.
you gotta make it and then take a photo and tell me what you think of it. That's the deal.
Fair enough. I will
All
absolutely
right.
do that. And yeah, now I have something to do because I'm not.
Perfect.
I don't have
And
any
it's easy
gigs.
too. It's easy. I'm not giving you a tough one.
That's my specialty. I love it. Everybody, Matt Ruby, thanks for tuning in and listening. And we'll hear you next time here on Greetings from Somerville.